Okay, in the last video we started looking at the value and we made it a little more contrasty. We made it look like this image was taken when this image was taken. Um, but there's one big problem, and that's shadow. You can see here that it must be the lighting here is you don't have real harsh shadows. But we want to put a shadow underneath, right? Because it'll look like it's just floating without a shadow if something's on the ground. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit so that we can do it, right? So we know we see the shadows and we see the quality of the shadows, and we should probably try to match any shadows we see, right? We can see in the car here these shadows. So there's a couple ways we can do this. So the first one, let's make a new layer, and let's get our brush tool and let's set our foreground to black. I'm going to make a pretty big brush tool, and I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm going to try to stay with the penguins right here, right? They'll put some there. Okay, now that looks terrible, right? Obviously. Well, let's change the order, right? So now the shadow is underneath the penguins. Still terrible. What are some qualities of shadows? They have fuzzy edges. So up here in Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, right? And we see the effect here, right? We can start making these shadows a little more feathered, right? So the edges are softer. I'm going to hit OK here because I think that looks okay. Still a little hot. Let's change this to multiply and bring the opacity down. So that multiply, remember how multiply works. It starts to throw with the layer behind it, right? It starts to mix better with the layer behind it. So I suggest with shadows you use multiply, and then you bring the opacity to wherever it is that you like it, right? So I might go about here, and let's say we're not happy with that. I could still transform this layer the way I can any other layer. So Command T brings us into transform. We could also go to Image, Edit, Free Transform, right? And I can say, oh, let me bring this down. It was too wide. Let me crush that down a little bit. Let me play with the opacity a little bit. And if you want to get really hardcore on shadows, you might actually build another layer and add even a little more touch shadow right at the touch point where, say, the feet actually touch, right? And again, in our class we don't have time to do through all this, but I'll go to Filter and repeat our Gaussian blur so it has the same quality. Same thing, I'll put it to multiply, right? And so again, it just depends on the level you want to go to in Photoshop, how we do it, right? But that is an easy way to create our shadow. I'll actually show you another quick tip. Let's say they had a real long cast shadow, and you'll see what I mean in a second. If I actually hold down the Command key and click on a layer, it will select all the non-transparent pixels in a layer. And so I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to fill this with black. And how am I going to fill it with black? I'll go to Edit, Fill, and say, yes, use the foreground color, because you might have content aware here. You don't want that, right? You want it to say foreground color. Hit OK. And now I've got this black, and deselecting a selection is Command D, right? And so I have these black penguins over my regular penguins. Now I'm going to go into Transform, which is Command T or Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this down a little bit, and now I'm going to right click on it and say let me skew, right? And we want it to throw the shadow this way. And I'm just simply moving it here, trying to get it to go close. Now I'm going to change the order, and I've started to bring in a cast shadow. Now the shadows in this image are straight left to right, so this cast shadow wouldn't work. Whoops. But then I do the same thing that we did before, right? Filter, maybe add to Gaussian blur, which again is that just because you can use the same filter again in the same settings quickly. Comes there, but the first time you have to go into blur, Gaussian blur. Do the same thing, multiply, and bring that down, right? For this, I might be tempted to go ahead and really skew here, right? Get this in. I might even go to distort, grab each corner, really start getting it here. and combine techniques, really. Just take this and maybe move this one this way a little bit. You know, just try anything to get those shadows to look right? Those are just some methods of building new shadows. Let's go ahead and reverse out to just for the next video to where we're right here.